And this is what I can imagine with the big debate around like capitalism, post-capitalism, is, you know, how can you use this as a way in, but then also say, but what are we actually talking about? And maybe we can't even yet imagine what they feel like they're losing something. And so it's interesting to witness this resistance to change and a kind of, upset with all these all the ways in which the other voices are being brought in, etc. So like, okay, I've achieved something, we're then going into the wider world of like, what am I adding into the narrative? What am I adding to the world?
Hey guys, what you're about to watch is one of the many interviews I took during my time in Thailand for DevCon 2024. I was in the country for a total of over a month and got the opportunity to meet a bunch of really cool people and interview them in person. DevCon itself was an incredible and interesting experience, and you can find my full review of it on my Patreon. So if you like the content I've been making and would like me to continue going to these kinds of events and improving, then I hope you'll become a patron starting at just $3 per month for access to loads of bonus content and Blockchain Socialist merch at patreon.com/theblockchainsocialist. Hi everyone, you're listening to another interview that I'm doing in Thailand. This time I'm in Bangkok. We are at the Funding the Commons Design Jam, and I'm here with my friend Susanne. She is a filmmaker and many more things. You helped us kind of lead through and help the people think through in the Design Jam, which is kind of like you can think of it as like a non-technical hackathon, is kind of how I think of it. But you helped people kind of think about how they can think about the narrative of the things that they're building. And so I thought it'd be great to talk to you about narratives broadly in crypto, because you also filmed a documentary a few years ago as well about the DAO space, and now a lot of things have changed since then, or things have developed. So yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation.
Wonderful, thanks.
Yeah, but would you maybe maybe you should give a much better introduction than what I gave to yourself and your work and like what we did in the Design Jam so far, and then we can jump into it.
Wonderful, thank you. And yeah, really grateful to have been invited by Funding the Commons to talk about something I'm passionate about. We loved it, but also that I do feel is so key at any stage of world building. And as a background, so you mentioned I'm a filmmaker. That's been my training. I've also worked in communication as a creative director for institutions like the UN, the little one, but working on the global goals and really, I guess, thinking through how concepts can be translated and turned into narratives, films that are evocative for the purpose of, behavior change or awareness, or any way that campaigns want to have an agenda. And it was a fantastic learning. I've worked with some wonderful people, and I've also become increasingly aware that a group of very smart, skilled people, I guess, working, mending and molding an agenda to then go out into the world. Once you go past the how much does it sell, how many clicks does it get, and all of this, and you feel like, okay, I've achieved something, we're then going into the wider world of like, what am I adding into the narrative? What am I adding to the world? And with some of that, I guess, especially when I work more on the commercial side, I started having more complex relationships with aspirational storytelling. And by that I mean, creating worlds that people can aspire to, which is most of a lot of marketing works like that. But really the real world impact of that is it's also feeding the narrative of not enoughness. Aspiration also always comes with having to get more, buy something, and also standards that we are inadvertently selling with that, and a lot of that is the kind of modernity, majority sort of cultural universality, so to speak, that many of us have grown up with, and that sit much deeper, I think, inside of us. So when I stepped away from the marketing and communications world for institutions, and really wanted to take a breather. What came with that also was a deeper immersion into community, so living with and also working amongst people who are really in a space of thinking what's next, not just in technology-wise, but system-wise, what are the next worlds. And although making the film around like the journey of the DAO was for me also a way to understand, like the interviews I made really were a way for me to learn and to dig a little bit into the care and the human aspect of all these people I'm meeting, and really go into like, why do you care and what's the longer term vision and how do humans and non-humans play into this. So often for me filmmaking is a sense making process, and at the same time I also felt that there was an ask to not maybe go ahead and narrate the next story, but actually to also introvert and say, right, like from which place do I come telling these stories as well? Once we're at a place where there's so many exciting things happening, and that there's going to be interest, like that, that more and more now the I guess mainstream news outlets and media want to know what it is so they can get it and grasp it and etc. And through a more personal journey of really looking beyond existing narratives. So something I mentioned is the hero story. I don't know how familiar you listeners would be. It's a sort of concept that's being used within writing, filmmaking. Like it's being taught, and in Hollywood very much your script has to sort of comply to these. So look it up. I won't be able to do it justice, but to realize that not only it's a sort of framework to work towards, which can be helpful, but it's also a monomyth. And the bigger impact of this monomyth is that it serves as the world-building tool, has served for a long time as a world-building tool or justification for a lot of the leanings towards individualism, towards the kind of leadership where people hope to be saved, and it does. I guess maybe I could speak to what it tends to not do, which is multiple voices, complexity, because there's always like the kind of solution, and also for failure. Right. I mean, so basically, I'm now already going into like the things that I feel like I would want to dig out a little bit more once we recover or compost this monomyth, which is another increasingly important aspect that I realized is I was like, what's the next story? What is this better story? And so part of this these last years of researching and introspection has been actually this again is a tendency of what's the next thing, the hero story tendency. And I really feel there needs to be some sort of composting of where we are with all the ugly bits and all the bits, because it is, the stories that we narrate also narrate us, and the way they come to us is from multiple. So there's a unfurling, as we like to call it. There's an unfurling to be done before I feel we actually know what is narrating us. Donna Haraway has this incredible quote in part of her book. It's important which stories tell stories, and the worlds that build the worlds. And so that's really the inquiry I'm coming with, and there are some essences of what might be kind of the next steps into it, but there's definitely no solutions. I think it's more of an attitude towards, integrating complexity, whilst obviously also knowing that there are limitations in communication. There are, to understand an audience can unfortunately at a big scale not mean that every individual person you can talk to them. So there will be simplification, but at the moment we communicate and think about our design to really, have it as a poster like this. These statistics are not actual humans, and so I speak about how we can think of rather than two-dimensional people as four-dimensional people, which means not only are they complex now, but they also live through time, and we all, whether we've experienced loss or wherever we are in our journey, to remind ourselves that worlds, if we want to really do it justice and really be authentic and allow authenticity, and everyone to bring all of it to it, whether that's in your organization or whether that is the users that we think of, then having some sort of level of awareness of the complexity of that feels really important to me.
Yeah, a lot to say there. I think, definitely if you look at, in particular, the crypto space, like there's definitely a lot of the hero myth. I think it's like pretty. That is a narrative archetype that is often used in stories around tech and kind of I think it's formed the ideology, and I think, I mean, you probably have a lot of thoughts on this too, but like the movement of like film generally into like this kind of archetype or like way of telling stories through the lens of like a particular person who saves the world in some way. Definitely a lot to say about that. Ideologically, rise of neoliberalism, I think, go hand in hand a bit. But and then also we see the opposite with like, I don't know, FTX, the fall of FTX, and just the crazy story of Sam Bankman-Fried, who was the hero and is now the villain or whatever else. But it's always like focused on this like, this one guy did this crazy thing, you know, rather than looking at, or it's more seldom that you can like look at the more systemic issues that led to like, why did this one crazy guy be able to like do these crazy things whenever like, shouldn't there have like, we don't live in isolation with one another, like other people saw what he was doing, you know, like someone must have known. Those stories are often kind of like, it complicates the story too much. I almost feel like we've come to a point where a lot of film, or the way that the news is like shared with people, is very like, it's dumbed down for you, as if you can't take the complexity as well. So I guess how do you try to? Well, what I noticed in the DAO video, in the documentary, was that you largely let the people speak for themselves and not really place any kind of like, this is really exciting what they're doing, or like they're so naive, you know, like there wasn't either of those things that I saw. So like, how do you? Because I imagine not telling the hero story is maybe sometimes actually more complex.
It is. It's difficult, and I think this is where, you know, the familiarity with drama in a certain way that you know, that culture and we ourselves like narrate the you know, the failure, the achievement, seeing ourselves also on a timeline of like, you know, achieving. There's such a familiarity with it that I do feel that the training towards seeing and portraying complexity, that it will take time and it will probably feel unfamiliar and hence maybe a little bit alienating. But thank you for picking up on that, because I think my tendency now is to let people speak and to intentionally allow different opinions to coexist. I actually feel that our capacity, and I say us and the audience capacity for complexity is incredibly astute and big. And you know, we did this poetry exercise yesterday, and it involved to be like someone writes a line and the next person picks it up. And whilst there's a little bit of an influence between the lines, when you read the poem, in theory, you'd be like, okay, it'll be a mess, and it's like it's just like it's a kind of nice creative task. But actually, one of the reasons I love it is when it is read back, it shows how much your mind is able and willing to bridge, you know, and that can obviously also be done in simplifying things. But I feel that, you know, there are traditions that are still very active that have a very complex narrative tradition, and so we don't have to start from scratch either. But something I'm questioning now is, yes, will there be a reduced role of top-down narration? You know, I will forever love films and cinema, but I do think it has its limitations. And so so Tony Lai and I sort of collaborate under this umbrella Mothertree Labs, and you know, the bringing, we say, law and lore together. And it's a bit of a sidestep, but I think it'll come in handy to really see how it might work into the space. So law as a code of social, you know, social cohesion and also understanding each other, to the awareness that you can change the law, and we see that a lot, but it's not going to be adapted. People don't see themselves belonging to this, or that it's alienating. And so if we are going to change, you know, different types of coding or governance, then what are the narrations that come with it? And again, you can release a video that encourages people and convinces them why it's better to work collaboratively. But really, and most of my research is done like kind of here, you know, like really the conviction for me comes, like, I know how I've changed whenever I've changed my behavior or mind, or changed my mind, and it has been usually experiential, and it has been through my peers or or like people close to me, or people I trust. So increasingly experimenting with and encouraging in-person storytelling. There's a set of cards that we're going to bring out this year, and it's prompts, 77 prompts. And that's really a gift back to the community. But these are questions that I've been collecting over the last 3 years, questions that brought out stories without being, how shall I say, without making you feel like you have to have the wittiest or the right answer or something.
Right.
And what I love about them is that they tend to bring out answers. Within the answers, there is a sort of witnessing each other's depth and amount of stories that we have. I'll give you an example. What is your relationship to your mother's maiden name? Right?
Yeah.
Which, I'd love to hear as well. But that's an example of a question because I've sat in a room with 10 people, and there should never be a sort of expectation that people answer, because there's a level of vulnerability that in answering this. But you suddenly get with a simple answer question like this, relationship to like how feminist your mom was, like how like cultural nuances, etc. So so that's an example of storytelling that is, maybe we can call it distributed storytelling, and that's not fast, and that's not like maybe it will happen slow at the speed of a connection and however long the evening is, but. So that is to say, I think the models of storytelling are maybe have to expand and be different. And and I would love to definitely be more hearing in what people are thinking in terms of, like, I say marketing, there's more, right? But like the storytelling when it comes to funding and getting people engaged and stakeholders and people using it. Because I would love to bring my expertise into it. But yeah, I'm currently like really looking at what is how do we compost the hero? Three of my sort of key who shall I say, like testing people are my stepfathers, and they for me represent, like, they're quite different, but they're all in some way people who've grown up in a world where their story was the majority story, like they were so used to in it. And because that is shifting now, I can really see in different ways how they've become really uncomfortable with that, and if they've almost they feel like they're losing something, and so it's interesting to witness this resistance to change, and a kind of upset with all these all the ways in which the other voices are being brought in, etc. So, and I want to give a little bit of empathy for that, because again, if we want to take people with us, then I guess we want to make a decision also if we want to cut and burn and run, or whether really the composting part is how that's done. And I really don't think that there's going to be a one-off campaign to do that. Yeah.
I definitely think it's going to take a long time to get rid of all that kind of ideological baggage, and I think, so I mean, I put some of these things on the table because they're kind of like, I think some of the narratives playing around. I mean, 3 of these are coming from Gitcoin, which does a lot of work, Kevin Iwaki, on trying to make new narratives in the crypto space. This is my book, and then these are like 2 oversized postcards that I accidentally printed.
Perfect for the camera.
But easier to see for the camera.
I imagine a postcard-sized.
On imagining a post-capitalist world that we're going to be sharing with during all these conferences. But so I think my feeling after hearing you say this is that if we can destroy or compost, the hero's journey or hero's narrative in the crypto space, which is like a very individualistic, libertarian kind of like space where, I mean, there's a lot of emphasis on like the individual accumulating capital, however, in which way they can. If they accumulate a lot of capital, then they're like, wow, that guy's a genius or whatever. If we can kind of like try to seed these new worlds to build, or these new narratives, and like make them something that people want to take part in, I feel like is maybe a step in the right direction. So like, so I'm curious, we can use the last few minutes maybe I'm curious to hear your feedback and thoughts on the postcard idea that we had. This is from our designer Ruben, and I remember we were like thinking about for even an event back when we went to Berlin. We were just like, what do we put on this postcard? Just like, what do we get? And he wrote this down, and I was like, oh, this is great. Yeah. This is. I didn't know what it was, but it was just like, I imagined a post-capitalist world with you, and I think it's in part what I liked about it, in like using this project as a vehicle for trying to seed a different framework for how to look at not just technology, but like the socioeconomics in which it is embedded in, is to like make an invite.
Yes.
I say, I imagine a post-capitalist world with you. So I mean, we're explicitly saying like world building in a way, but also we are making it collective. We're not saying like we are going to do this, or you have the power to like spend your money or whatever, which is often the way that advertising is framed. It's like, we want to do it with you, come with us. Yeah. Which, I don't know, that was like, I'm excited about that, but I'm curious as a
I'm sure.
someone else to tell
how many
me
minutes do we have?
why I'm wrong. Or
Tony brought the sticker yesterday, and I was like, this is because you're absolutely right. You just picked up on something I was going to say, which is like, we imagine something with you. Like, you can imagine that a brand that wants to sound really personable would do that, and already like my kind of flag goes up, would go up with that. Whereas this is a person, whoever is like putting this invitation out there. And so I really love, invitations to co-create are absolutely the portal into belonging into this other world, because you design yourself, you're creating it together. So beautiful sensing into that. There's a person I really have started to cherish when it comes to words, and this is, so Bayo Akomolafe, is someone who writes incredibly well about, how we want to, an invitation to move beyond the logics that we have grown up with. And so, I'm sure you have so many conversations around post-capitalism, capitalism, like who it rubs up. And I think provocations are absolutely needed. And I would kind of like borrow his sensibility, and please read him because he's so good with words, so I can't do it justice. But sometimes sometimes we have to also imagine how we can step beyond an existing logic, because when the anti this tends to enforce this, right. And this is what I can imagine with the big debate around like capitalism, post-capitalism, is how can you use this as a way in, but then also say, but what are we actually talking about? And maybe we can't even yet imagine because in discourse often it's been like, here's this, and then there's this post this, and then there's this post this, and how I'm trying to say it, and it's almost like. This is not about word policing. It is about like, and actually, what do you personally mean by that? And then I think this is where storytelling, like words, can invite storytelling, so that we are not coming in assuming that we know what we're talking about.
Right. Yeah. Even though I do have a lot of thoughts about it.
Oh, which one? Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's. It was interesting because it's like. It is still, even though like it's collective but also personal, because it's like it's from me to you. So I feel like it's a starting point still of maybe meeting where people are at, who may be still in the like stuck in this framework of individualism, to where they can then make an invite them. So like kind of the joke that I'm trying to like do with this as well is like, write a letter to your post-capitalist lover and like give it to them, and then like imagine with them. And
it's big enough to write a letter.
Yes,
as well.
yeah, exactly.
That is wonderful. Something that we started doing in Tony and I host a gathering called Eco Weaving. And so this is the regenerative Web3 ever-growing beautiful network, and one of the invitations there was to write a letter to an ancestor on a page of wildflower seed paper of the region, very important. And then and in this letter really, and this might be someone that you haven't met before, but maybe an ancestor that you think of when you think about system change, or like someone that you can imagine has also been going through big shifts in their life, and connect to this previous generation, and then plant it and see something else grow and see maybe how, things are not just linear, but connect to a sense of circularity. And I also feel part of storytelling is going to be a lot of ritual inventing, because, copy pasting other cultural rituals, I think taking invitations and inspiration from it, but I really feel that one of our creative tasks is going to be like sense making and ritual making for the more abstract aspects of our life. And anyway, this came up when you said letter. I love that. I'm totally cheering you on. This is great.
Nice. Thank you. Well, I think we're about at 20 minutes, so I want to thank you so much for coming on. And if you want to share with anyone like where your work is, or if you want to share any websites people can check out, or social media, whatever you prefer.
So Mothertree Labs, as one word, .com is Tony Lai and my research, soil, and we see it as it is our work, but because of the kind of growing mycelial community, we see it as a community of practices, and for us, learning out loud, being, having a very, relational approach to where people's heads are at, where projects are at, and how we can connect them, and that's ever changing, right? So. And then continuing this thinking and conversation around like how stories exist. So in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we've had some beautiful examples and experiences of how the traditional Maori narrative and relationality to nature, Mother Earth, like their ancestors and the personhood of nature, how that's kind of being brought up after being suppressed for obviously an extended period of time, and whilst they're also digesting the pain of that and the trauma of that, there's just such an incredible, there's so many examples in the world where on a small scale or on even like nationwide scale, this is being done and emerging. And so constantly learning and sharing whatever we can in forms that make sense for different localities.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much.